I don't know exactly when it changed. For years, Amelia was nothing more than my best friend's mom. She was Lauren's mother, a widow who had been single for as long as I could remember. She was older, 20 years older than me to be exact. There was nothing about our dynamic that should have ever made this possible. And yet, here I am. I replay the moments over and over, trying to pinpoint when everything shifted, when I stopped seeing her as just Lauren's mom. Maybe it was that evening when I stayed for dinner, and she laughed at something I said, her hand brushing against my arm in a touch so light, so casual, that I almost didn't notice. Almost. Or maybe it was the way her eyes lingered on mine just a second too long whenever we talked. The way I started catching her looking at me from across the room, only for her to glance away a moment later, as if she hadn't been watching me at all. I had spent so much time in their house that I practically felt like part of the family. Lauren was my best friend, closer than a sister, and after her father passed, I found myself drawn even deeper into their lives. They needed support, and I was there. I wanted to be there. But somewhere along the way, something between Amelia and me changed. It was slow at first, so gradual that I almost missed it, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. That day, everything became real. It was just the two of us at the house. Lauren had gone out, and I had stayed behind, as I often did, keeping Amelia company, helping with small things around the house. The air felt different that afternoon. Charged. I noticed the way she watched me when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she stood a little closer than usual. The subtle tension in the space between us. And then she crossed it. She stepped toward me, hesitant at first, her body mere inches from mine. I should have moved. I should have stopped this before it even began. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because when her eyes met mine, something in me snapped. This wasn't just a fleeting moment of curiosity. This wasn't just some passing attraction. This was something deeper. Darker. Her hand lifted, tracing a feather-light touch along my jawline, her fingers warm against my skin. I felt my breath catch. I knew this was wrong. She was older. She was the mother of my best friend. There were a million reasons why this should not have been happening. And yet, when she leaned in, when her lips brushed against mine in the softest, most uncertain touch, I didn't pull away. I leaned into it. The world around us ceased to exist. The weight of everything, our age difference, Lauren, the consequences that should have stopped us, disappeared. All I could feel was her. The warmth of her body pressing against mine. The way her lips molded to mine, slow, unhurried, like she was memorizing every second of this. Like she had wanted this just as much as I had. When she pulled back, her breathing was uneven, her eyes wide with something I couldn't name. She opened her mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to say something that would shatter the moment before it could turn into something irreversible. But I didn't let her. Instead, I closed the space between us once more, pressing my lips to hers in a way that left no room for doubt. This was happening, and there was no going back. She apologized. The moment our lips parted, the weight of reality came crashing down, and Amelia stepped back as if the space between us could erase what had just happened. She started, shaking her head, her breathing still uneven. I don't know what that was. I don't know what's wrong with me. I didn't move. I couldn't move. Because I knew exactly what that was. And I knew deep down that it wasn't the last time. But we lied to ourselves anyway. We told each other it was a mistake. That it would never happen again. That it couldn't happen again. We were wrong. It started small. Subtle. A glance that lasted too long. A touch that lingered for just a second more than necessary. Texts sent late at night, under the guise of harmless conversation, but laced with something unspoken, something dangerous. I should have stopped. I should have let that kiss be the first and last mistake. But the next time I was at their house, alone in the kitchen with her, she brushed past me, her hand grazing my lower back in the lightest, most innocent touch. And suddenly, I was burning all over again. The tension between us became unbearable. Every second in the same room felt like a test, like the universe was daring us to lose control. And we did. Again. And again. And again. It wasn't just about the physical anymore. It was the thrill, the secrecy, the danger of knowing that at any moment we could be caught. I had never wanted anything more. And Amelia, she wanted me too. She was the one who pulled me into dark corners when no one was looking. The one who kissed me breathless when we were supposed to be talking about something safe. The one who, late at night, when Lauren had gone to bed, whispered against my lips, "We should stop." But she never did. Neither of us did. Every time I thought I could walk away, she proved me wrong. Every time I convinced myself this was just a phase, something reckless and fleeting, she proved me wrong. I could see it in the way she looked at me, in the desperation behind her kisses, in the way her hands gripped my waist like she needed me to keep herself grounded. This wasn't just lust. It was something else. Something neither of us were ready to admit. But we weren't alone in this. There was one problem. A problem with a name. A face. A person who trusted us both. Lauren. Lauren, who had no idea that the two people closest to her were keeping the biggest secret of all. Lauren, who would never forgive me if she found out. Lauren, who could never find out. And yet, as Amelia pulled me into her arms once more, as her lips pressed against mine in the darkness of her home, one terrifying thought clung to the back of my mind. It was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. I knew it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. The secret meetings, the stolen glances, the electricity in the air every time our hands brushed in passing. We were playing with fire, and we both knew it. And yet, neither of us stopped. Every time I told myself this had to end, she would pull me back in, sometimes with a touch, sometimes with nothing more than a look that left me breathless. I had never felt anything like this before. The rush, the fear, the absolute, undeniable craving. And then the invitation came. A weekend trip. Just Lauren, her mother, and me. It was supposed to be a short getaway. 2 nights at a cozy cabin by the lake. Lauren had suggested it so innocently, so casually, completely unaware of what she was really asking me. It was the most reckless, most dangerous situation I could put myself in. I should have said no. I almost did. But then, when I glanced at Amelia, I saw it. That flicker of something dark in her eyes. A challenge. She was daring me to go, daring me to see how far we could take this. And like the absolute idiot that I was, I said yes. The moment we arrived at the cabin, I knew I had made a mistake. It was too intimate, too isolated. The air smelled like pine and lake water, and everything was too quiet. No distractions, no crowds, no chance to escape whatever this tension between us had become. Lauren was excited, completely oblivious to the slow-burning disaster unfolding right in front of her. She took the room upstairs, while Amelia and I were left with 2 smaller rooms on the first floor. Separate rooms. It should have been fine. But the way she looked at me as we carried our bags inside told me that this weekend was going to be anything but fine. That first night, we sat by the fire, drinking wine, talking, pretending everything was normal. But beneath the surface, nothing was normal. Every time Amelia spoke, I felt her voice vibrate through me. Every time she laughed, I felt it settle deep in my chest. And every time her gaze met mine, it was like she was daring me to slip up. Lauren went to bed early, exhausted from the drive. And that was when everything started unraveling. It started with something as simple as a walk. I had stepped outside for air, my body too tense, my thoughts spiraling in too many directions at once. And then I heard the door open behind me. Amelia. She said nothing at first, just walked beside me down toward the water. The night was cold, but I barely felt it. Not when she was this close. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "This was a bad idea," she murmured. I let out a dry laugh. No kidding. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then, so softly I almost missed it, she whispered, "I can't stop." My breath caught. I turned to face her, and suddenly she was too close. Close enough that I could feel the heat of her body despite the chilly night air. Close enough that I could smell her perfume, faint but intoxicating. Close enough that when she reached up, her fingers brushing my jaw, I knew exactly where this was going. I should have walked away. But instead, I let my hands find her waist, pulling her in, kneading her in a way that felt almost unbearable. She let out a soft, shaky breath, her eyes dark with something I couldn't name. Then she kissed me. It wasn't soft this time. It wasn't hesitant. It was desperate. Starved. Like she had been holding herself back for too long. And now, here in the dark, with no one watching, she was finally letting herself have me. I felt the world tilt. Her hands were in my hair, her body pressed against mine, and I was drowning in her. I should have stopped. I should have thought about Lauren, about the inevitable disaster waiting for us at the end of this. But Amelia owned me in that moment. And I knew, by the time this weekend was over, there would be no turning back. I had promised myself I would be careful, that we would be careful. But desire and discretion don't mix. The more Amelia and I tried to control this thing between us, the more it consumed us. The stolen moments, the whispered confessions, the unbearable tension of pretending nothing was happening. It was like holding back a storm with bare hands. And that night, the storm finally broke. I was in my room when I heard the knock. Soft, hesitant. I knew it was her before I even turned the handle. She stood in the dim light of the hallway, her breathing uneven, her eyes dark with something I recognized all too well. "This is getting impossible," she whispered. I swallowed hard, already feeling my pulse race. "Amelia." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her, and shook her head. "I can't. I don't know what to do anymore." Her voice was raw, filled with something desperate. "You're always there. And every time I tell myself to stop, I just..." She exhaled sharply, running her fingers through her hair. "I can't." I understood exactly what she meant. I had tried to stop too. Tried to tell myself that whatever this was, whatever we were, was nothing more than an impossible mistake. But it wasn't. It wasn't. And right now, with her standing in front of me, looking at me like I was the only thing in the world that made sense, I stopped caring about consequences. I moved toward her before I could second-guess it. And the second my lips found hers, I knew. There was no stopping this now. She responded instantly, her arms pulling me close, her fingers curling into the fabric of my shirt as if she needed something to hold on to. Her breath was warm against my skin, her hands exploring, tracing slow lines down my back. "I don't know what this means," she whispered between kisses, her voice unsteady. "But I don't want to stop." Neither did I. I let my fingers graze her skin, let myself be lost in the way she sighed when I touched her. Then she pulled back just enough to meet my gaze, her eyes burning with something fierce and unspoken. "I want to feel you," she said softly. I barely had time to process her words before she was lifting her shirt over her head, her movements slow, deliberate. My heart pounded. I reached for her. And that's when it happened. The door swung open. A sharp gasp. And suddenly, everything shattered. "Lauren." She stood in the doorway, frozen, her face draining of color. Time stopped. The silence was deafening. I could feel Amelia tense against me, feel the moment everything between us collapsed. Lauren didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stared. At me. At her mother. At the undeniable truth of what she had just walked in on. My entire body locked up, a cold dread sinking deep into my bones. I wanted to move. To speak. To fix this. But there was nothing to say. There was no way to undo this. No way to explain it. No way to make her unsee it. Lauren's expression twisted into something unreadable, shock, anger, betrayal, all crashing together in real time. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. And then, she turned and walked away. The sound of her footsteps faded down the hallway, followed by the sharp slam of her bedroom door. I flinched. The weight of what had just happened settled over me like a crushing force. Amelia exhaled shakily, reaching for her discarded shirt with trembling hands. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, my hands numb, my pulse still racing. I had known this moment would come eventually. That secrets like this don't stay hidden forever. But I hadn't expected it to feel like this, like my entire world had just crumbled in a single instant. I had lost her. Lauren, my best friend. And maybe, just maybe, I had lost Amelia too. I sank my face into my hands, my chest tight, my thoughts spinning. And the only question repeating over and over in my head was it worth it?